To start off, when we're talking about capacity in ARIA operations, it's important to know that we have this capacity analytics engine. So it leverages AI capabilities to actually predict your capacity usage. So it looks at your usage and then predicts that out into the future. So all the stuff that I'll be showing today in the demo, just realize that this is not just looking at what happened in the past. This is actually taking and projecting that into the future. So I think it's really important to understand that that it is based on those AI-powered projections. So those projections are used throughout many different features within ARIA operations. So like today we're talking about looking at capacity of your environment. So that is the main use case, but definitely not the only one. There's workload optimization. We have some of the capacity. For like right sizing, it's used that for right sizing of virtual machines. There's some cost components that come in there. So even our like migration planning, what if planning, things like that. So the engine is used across many different features. But like I said, today we're just mainly talking from a capacity perspective. So a couple things to point out. This is it's not just looking at the usage. It actually understands things like the periodicity within a calendar. So it knows that like the day of the week or the day of the month. So when these cycles happen, it can look for different types of patterns. So it can say, it's this particular time of day, it sees this particular pattern, and it kind of projects those patterns into the future. So that calendar-aware periodicity is important. And then also another one is exponential decay. So it kind of gives a little bit more weight to more recent usage. So, as your environment changes, you need to be able to adapt to those changes. So it's aware of those as well. So hopefully that makes sense, kind of setting the stage kind of high level. When we talk about I'm going to show you the projections in the demo here. So just a couple, like I said, just a couple slides here. So the main topic today is showing the assessing capacity, predict your demand, looking at when you're going to run out of capacity for your clusters. And then you can go in and kind of configure your business intent and tweak the system and tell it how you want to manage your capacity. And then you can see here some of the projections that we get from that. So, rather than show you this, I'm going to just switch into a live environment and show you what it looks like in real life rather than show you some slides here. So to start off, I am on the launch pad in ARIA operations. So, since we're talking capacity, I'm going to go into the capacity one here. And again, capacity. So this is looking at the capacity of my VCF clusters in my VMware cloud environment. So let's go into capacity here. And what you can see now is, let me go to all data centers view. So what you can see here is all of my data centers. So it's showing me the data centers grouped by criticality. So you see I've got a few up here that are critical, that are running out of capacity. So, they're basically trying to get my attention. I need to go and look at those and see what's going on. And then the ones down here are showing normal. So those are okay from a capacity perspective. So let's just pick one of them here. Let's go for production. Production sounds really important. I think most customers think production is an important environment. So just kind of tell you a little bit about what you can see here in the UI. So you can see this is made up of 5 different clusters. I've got 3 clusters that are showing as critical, 2 that are normal. I've got some recommendations over here, so you can start to see some costs showing up. How I mentioned cost at the beginning, that's coming from the capacity engine. We actually have some cost showing up here as well, some recommendations where we can go and reclaim some capacity and save some money. And then workload optimization. So this is balancing our workloads out across these different clusters, shifting some of the workloads from these high utilization clusters to the ones that are have additional capacity. So that's the workload optimization piece that I also mentioned at the beginning. So you can start seeing where some of these features are starting to expose themselves. So let me show you some of the projections here. Since so this particular cluster, you can see a lot of red here. This one definitely is having issues. So you can see it's saying 0 days remaining. So basically I'm out of capacity. So a couple things to point out on this chart, I think help you make sense of what we're seeing here. So let me pick one that looks a little better here. So so what you can see here along the top here is my usable capacity of my cluster. So this is automatically taking whatever resources I need for HA out. So this is after we take out admission control or buffers, any of those capacities. So this is how much capacity that I have that I can run workloads. And then this is my demand showing here. This is my historical demand. So you can see how much of my resources within my usable capacity that I'm using. And you see here on the right, after this vertical line here, this is now. So this is telling me we're in current time, and then everything to the right of it is the projection. So you can see where it's looked at my workload and it's projecting that out into the future. Let me change the time here so you can see where it crosses. So you see now it's gone out here, and you can see where my demand is projected to cross my usable capacity line. That's the point in time when I will run out of capacity in my cluster. So this is telling me, this is saying, I have this many days before I run out. So I need to go and, basically, address my capacity issue before I hit that, 286-day mark. So hopefully that makes sense. You can kind of see that projection. You can see the projection range. So you can see it's not just a single line. It actually tells me, it thinks the projection is going to be within this range. So hopefully that makes sense. It's kind of showing it from a high level. Let me double click and go into one of these clusters so I show you a little more detail. Actually, let me go to a different cluster. Shows a little bit more that I can talk to. So let me squeeze this over here. Okay, so I've just switched to a different cluster because this has this will have a little bit more data that I can talk to. So you can see here, it's saying my time remaining is greater than a year. So I have plenty of capacity in this particular cluster. Capacity remaining. So it's saying I have is projected 29% capacity remaining. So it's important to remember this capacity remaining is based on that projection, and it's looking at that projection 3 days in the future. So it's saying, it takes my utilization, projects it out, a few days in the future, 3 days precisely, and then it says, based on your short-term growth, we think you have about 29% of your capacity remaining. And then it also gives me the absolute value here. So you notice here, it's also saying my most constrained by memory demand. So it's looking at it from these 3 different dimensions here. So CPU demand, memory demand, and disk-based demand. So it's saying I'm most constrained based on memory. So that's the one it's using to say what my capacity remaining is. So if I click here on memory, you can see here what it's showing. So nothing too exciting. It looks like we had a little drop in our memory usage last couple of days, but the system thinks that the utilization may go back up to what it was in the past. So that's where the exponential decay will come in. Give it a few more days. If it stays low like this, then it'll learn that that's what the new normal is, and then you'll see this instead of curving up, it'll be more more horizontal. So that's where you start to see that exponential decay that I talked about. A couple of things to point out here. I know I get a lot of questions, like how much data is used in calculating these projections. Looks like it's more than a year on this particular cluster, but what you want to look for is on the chart here, you'll see another vertical line that says projection calculation start point. And if you see it on there, that basically tells you when those projections start from. So it really uses all of the historical data unless you go and reset it for some reason. So because I don't see it on the chart here, my projection calculation start point is well over a year in the past. So it's using quite a bit of data to come up with these projections. So a couple of things I want to point out in here is if I click on capacity remaining, I can see a little bit more details. So I already talked about capacity remaining. I didn't mention the virtual machines remaining over here. So what virtual machines remaining is doing is it's looking at the different virtual machine profiles that we have in the cluster. And it's saying, based on the size of these virtual machines, I can fit 32 more virtual machines in my cluster. So you can see it's most constrained by the average profile, and you can see it over here where my my average virtual machine, it says I can fit 32 more virtual machines based on the average size or utilization of the virtual machines in this cluster. So I think it makes it a lot easier to understand the capacity when you're looking at it from, I can fit 32 more virtual machines in there, and I don't have to go and do the math and say, these virtual machines, are this size or use this much resources. It automatically figures that out for me. But I can go in and configure my own virtual machine profiles. So you can see I've got one here, TKG small node. And based on that profile, it can hold 86 of them. So I can go in here and custom profiles, and I can add my own profiles if I wanted to, and have it tell me, like if I had a t-shirt size, small, medium, large, I can add a profile for small, medium, and large. And it'll tell me how many smalls I can fit, how many mediums I can fit, how many large I can fit. So, pretty nice to be able to see that from a virtual machine remaining perspective. And then if I'm out of capacity, it'll also switch over here and show me my shortfall. So it'll tell me how many VMs I have beyond my capacity. So, I may have, like if a cluster's out of capacity, I may have, say, 10 virtual machines shortfall. That means I provisioned 10 virtual machines too many in the cluster, and I need to either go out of capacity or remove some virtual machines. So a couple other things to point out on this page that I think is helpful to understand. As you know, I talked about, it's looking at this capacity from these 3 different perspectives here. So CPU demand, memory demand, and disk space demand. I can actually look at the actual numbers down here in this chart, and if I expand it out, I can see if I have multiple capacity models. I'm not going to get into all the different capacity models in this call. We can do it on one of the more advanced sessions on a later call. But if I enable, say, allocation model, I would see my capacity for CPU from a demand or allocation model perspective, and then it just shows me the most constrained one here at the summary at the top. So a couple things to point out: my total capacity. So this is the total amount of capacity in the cluster. My usable capacity. So this is where you take out resources for like admission control and buffers. And speaking of admission control, you can see it over here. We're reserving 25% of our capacity for admission control. And then our buffers, so this is a capacity setting that we've got set. So I'm reserving an additional 5% of capacity, just as a warm fuzzy. So I know I can, grow a little bit more if I wanted to in there. So basically, we're taking about 30% of our total capacity. That gives us our usable capacity in the cluster. The other thing to point out here is this used capacity. This is based on that 3-day projection that I was talking about for capacity remaining. So you see capacity remaining here based on a three-day projection, and uses that same 3-day projection for the used number here. If you click on this little info icon, it gives some descriptions of all of these metrics. And I think it's, like I say, it's really important to understand that used and remaining both are based on that 3-day projection. I know it can be confusing if you're going to look at free space and then you compare free space to capacity remaining and seeing they're different. The difference is because one's based on projection and the other one is looking at right now. So hopefully that makes sense. Not getting too technical for you there. And then recommended size. So this is using that projection for the cluster, and basically says, based on the utilization of the cluster and my capacity settings, my time remaining score thresholds, it adds 30 days on there and says, okay, to run my capacity, my cluster, to keep it green plus 30 days, this is how much capacity that I need in that cluster. So this helps me size my cluster. So I can tell if my cluster is larger than it needs to be by looking at the recommended size, comparing that to the usable capacity of my cluster. So you can see here, 183 gigahertz is what I need, and I've got 209 gigahertz of usable. So hopefully that makes sense. I know it can get a little confusing. I think the important part here is just reference, if you ever you need to figure out what these are, just hit the little info icon. That's the nice little guide there, helps explain what you're seeing on the chart. So I think that's probably the most important thing on here.